And now joining us with more on Israel's barring of Congresswomen Omar and Tlaib from entering the country, we have journalist and political analyst Naphtali Bensimon and Marc Schulman, columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com. Thank you both so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll actually start with you, Marc. Do you believe that this was the best course of action? And if not, what would you have done differently?
Okay, it was the worst possible course of action. I mean, to say yes, and then say no, and then say yes, and then leak the letter where she sort of leads to come was the worst combination of things we possibly could have done. First of all, we should have just let them come. The amount of difficulty they would have caused would have been minor. It would have been page 30 stories. They would have come, taken some pictures, complained about the wall here, complained about this here, but that would have been it. It would have made minor news. Instead, it's dominating American news coverage everywhere. It's the lead story over the weekend in almost all the news coverage. Millions of people have heard about BDS who had never heard of it before. It's the worst possible outcome for Israel, and it also made us the handmaid of President Donald Trump. So it was the worst outcome. We're destroying our relations with the Democratic Party for the next generation, and I can't think of a worse way of handling this.
Naphtali, would you agree?
Yes, of course. I'm so amazed from the wisdom of the Israeli politician, like the foreign minister and the prime minister, to boycott a Congress member from the democratic country for what? That because they don't like us? They are the only one they don't like Israel policy or Israel country or the Jewish state. We have so many in the world, and it was a chance to say to them, okay, don't like us. You are a member of the BDS. Never mind. This is part of a democratic state to let you in, and you know what? Maybe you will change your mind. And if not, it's okay. But this is an obligation to the politicians in the Congress from the Republican side and the Democratic side.
Would you then extend that argument, though, that logical kind of train of thought, towards the BDS law in general? Because that's really been a very contentious thing in the media, is that Israel is barring BDS activists. So couldn't you really extend that same argument?
Okay, so two parts. First of all, you could, but you have to separate. These are congresswomen. They represent the people of the United States, their districts. They're a whole other level altogether than an activist for some NGO that's a BDS supporter. Now, I personally think the whole BDS law is ridiculous, frankly, because what are we afraid of? I mean, I can't understand. We are strong, we are powerful, we are sure of our ways most of the time, and yet we're afraid these people are going to come and say nasty things about us? Really? Is that what's really scaring us so much? I don't get it. We're afraid of our own shadow?
So it's so insulting that we are one of the most powerful country on earth, a very democratic country. This is the narrative. This is the image. This is what everyone in the United States knows about this region, that there is only one state is a democratic state. So to let those two congresswomen, to make now the whole show in United States against Israel, come on.
So then that brings me back to my question, Marc. I'll come back to you. Why then did they do this? Especially, when you take into account that kind of tiff between Ambassador Dermer and Friedman, and how, Dermer is saying, oh yeah, we'll let them in, and then suddenly we didn't, and Friedman says,
President
Katz,
Trump.
And Katz is saying no.
Katz was just saying that because he wanted to get even with Dermer, but we'll leave that aside. The reality was President Trump. President Trump pushed the Israeli government first privately. When privately didn't work, he went public with his tweets. Prime Minister Netanyahu is dependent on President Trump. He's all in with President Trump at this point. He's like a gambler. He's bet everything on President Trump. He has to double down again with President Trump. When the history of this period is written, and the pluses and minuses are written about Prime Minister Netanyahu's period as Prime Minister, I believe the worst thing that will be said about him is how he destroyed America's bipartisan relationship with Israel. That is what he has done.
But is that really something you can blame on Netanyahu or even Trump?
I can blame it 100% on Netanyahu. Netanyahu went to Congress with the Iran agreement. Now, doesn't mean the Iran agreement...
He was invited by Congress.
He was invited by Congress against the will of the President of the United States.
But he was invited by Congress.
But he was against the will of the President of the United States. No one has ever done that. A foreign leader has not come against the will of the President of the United States to talk against the President of the United States in Congress. Now, I don't think the agreement was a perfect agreement, mind you, but it was a done deal. It was very clear at that point that nothing could be done. So that was the first thing he did.
But then again, doesn't Netanyahu have an obligation? And I'm playing, for the sake of better or worse, Netanyahu has an obligation to defend Israel's
Absolutely.
interests.
I mean, absolutely has the right to defend its interests. And what he should have said is, I think it's a terrible agreement, but I'm going to work to try to make it better instead of going behind the back of President Obama, who's beloved by the Democratic Party. The reality is that he has played the Republican game for the last at least 3 or 4 years. He won. I mean, the fact of the matter is Trump was elected. No one expected it. Trump was elected. So he won that bet. But Trump is like a poison, shallot. It may be good for the moment, but the long term, Trump is so despised by at least half of the Americans that being identified with Trump is a disaster for the long term of Israel.
It smells so bad that we are working totally for President Trump, for his election. We have an internal interest. We have a relationship and commerce and business relationship with China, South Korea, and other countries that President Trump doesn't like, but it's our own interest. Of course, the United States is the biggest ally. It's a family. It's something that we are very strong. But we should say to the President Trump, we have a democratic tradition that congressmen from both parties are most welcome to Israel, whatever is their opinion. This is a tradition. This is part of our history. And we cannot change that because President Trump didn't like it. We should say, with all due respect, thank you very much, President Trump, but in this case, we will let them go in.
Naphtali Bensimon, Marc Schulman, thank you so much for coming in.